It went away in the night, so it's okay.
No problems then?
I have a lot of problems, but no.
Couple guys have commented on the course being too narrow, too many turns at the finish. Any comment?
Yeah, it's always like that. I mean, we comment every year and complain, but the biggest problem is 200 fresh guys. This race is probably not made for these intensities these days for 200 guys. I mean, 150 guys is a lot safer than 200, and you get guys that have never done the tour, so they want to take risks and, you know, sort of cowboys. But, you know, it all mellows out after the first week, so we'll try and stay out of trouble.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Lance.
He really is quite relaxed, isn't he, Lance Armstrong, this year? But here's the overall situation. Bradley McGee, the winner of the prologue, 4 seconds clear of David Miller because he got a sprint bonus yesterday. Jaime Zubeldi, who's third in the prologue, still third. No change at all in the top 5. Ulrich fourth. Victor Hugo Pena for US Postal there. The man who gained yesterday, Andy Fleekinger, in a long breakaway and moved up into 7th place with small bonuses. And as a result is the wearer of the white jersey today as the leading young rider in the overall classification. Armstrong there, 11 seconds down in 8th place. But Hamilton still in the race, Paul, and that's a tremendous achievement by this man. 2 riders have gone away after 5 kilometres today. Here they are for you. Lilian Yegu, Crédit Agricole. We're looking at Frédéric Finot of the Jean de la Tour team, and they are the breakaways. Let's have a quick look at the map of the route. It is the longest stage so far at 204 kilometres. We're right up on the far right of the country now, not far away from the Belgian borders, and indeed not far away from the Luxembourg frontier either. And this is a race now which we expect the sprinters to dominate because I think they will pick up the 2 breakaways. A few little facts for you at La Ferté-sur-Jouarre. It's a tour debut for this town, and same to be said for Sedan. And looking down there, it was a 374 kilometre stage in 1903, so the boys are lucky today. It's a mere 204. 3 sprints along the way. We'll update you in a moment on the results so far. 2 4th category climbs. We've had 1 of those as well, and we'll give you the result of that very shortly. We're looking here now at Lilian Yegu, Paul, Crédit Agricole and Frédéric Finot. The current lead is over 11 minutes. Both first-timers in the Tour.
A lot of first-timers in the Tour this year so far as well, Phil, but I think the big story for me is the fact that Tyler Hamilton is actually still in the bike race. He's got a V-shaped crack in his clavicule, which really is quite remarkable. It was his team manager who actually wanted him to stop and not carry on in the Tour de France. Tyler said, no, I want to keep going, I want to stay in the bike race. One thing is for absolute certain, he is in a lot of pain today, and he's using an awful lot of courage to stay in this event.
He's living in the true tradition of a Tour de France. We've lost 2 riders, though, of the 198, only 2 days ago, starting in Paris. Already gone, Leipheimer and Lotz, both in Rabobank, so we're down to 196. And 21 of the 22 teams now have all of their 9 men intact. First sprint today was at Yolgon at 43 kilometres covered. Finot went over ahead of Yegu. It was hardly a sprint, they just carried on. Jean-Patrick Nazon brought the peloton over and got 2 seconds time bonus 9 minutes and 40 seconds later. So that was a long way back, but it got worse news for the peloton. They've had 1 little climb, the Côte de la Charmelle at 46, soon after the sprint. Yegu's turn to go over first there from Finot, and Monjan cleaned up. He's in the King of the Mountains lead after yesterday, got a couple of 1 point for that, so he's still in the lead there. And the gap there was 7 minutes 40, but right now it has increased much further than that. So I think we're going to see a long chase. 11 minutes and 10 seconds is the current time gap for the 2 leaders. Plenty of chasing to be done as the riders course across north-eastern France. We'll take our first break. Stay with us.
The 2003 Tour de France on OLN.
And welcome back. We're looking at the 2 early leaders on today's stage of the Tour de France, Yegu and Finot. And these riders are both first-timers in the Tour de France. The gap is just on 11 minutes, but the chase has begun, I think, behind, as they're trying now to close it down. Well, there's no doubt about the big story today. After the loss of Levi Leipheimer yesterday with a broken hip, we are now looking here at the back of the peloton of the other hero, Tyler Hamilton. Confirmed double fracture of his collarbone on the right side. And here he is riding along at the back, guarded by teammates who are keeping a very close eye on him. Now CSC are saying that they're reassessing their ambitions for the Tour with Tyler Hamilton, of course, but they are hoping to get him to Paris, and they're very good for Tyler. Looking here, Paul, at the gap, it's come down for the first time for quite a while, inside 11 minutes, so they're on the move.
They're on the move. It's very important for Lotto to pull this bike race back together. We're about to go through the feeding zone. It's always a dangerous moment as well. It's a moment when bags are being passed up by the helpers of the teams, and you're usually going through here at around about 45 kilometers an hour, so you have to be pretty attentive. And it's a point in the race where very often accidents do happen, and you can be sure that men like Lance Armstrong will be very attentive at this point.
Oh, just looking at the at Fino here. He's quite an accomplished rider, and he's only a youngster. This man is a second-year pro. He moved on to the Crédit Agricole team, by the way, when Fino left it for the Jean de la Tour team, so a little bit of a swap over. 95.8 kilometers to go, so Paul, they've been in the lead now for 100 kilometers.
That's a long way. They escaped early on in the day, built themselves a maximum advantage of 11 minutes and 20 seconds at one stage. But we did have a little bit of excitement a few moments ago, because in fact one of the television motorbikes caught up with the cable joining the camera to the transmitter, actually caught hold of the handlebars of the Crédit Agricole rider Lilian Jégou, and he went down very dramatically. The race referee's car almost clipped him as they went off into the fields, but fortunately it appears that neither of these two riders were hurt in the incident. They got back up, but they will certainly have been shaken by that crash.
It was a little bit of a heart stopper. It was just before we came live to air, and hats off to the driver of the chief commissaire's car. He headed for the field, but I dread to think what would have happened had we been in a town conurbation or in a forested road, because he would have had nowhere to go. Very good piece of reaction, that's for sure. Anyway, he quickly remounted. They've been along a couple of times to check his gears out, but he looks fine. You can see the cut arm, though, the elbow on him here, left side. So it was a heavy fall and totally unexpected, and we can't repeat the comments made to the television cameraman on television, but he's obviously getting these pictures for us right now.
Well, it's always a difficult thing and a difficult job that those guys have to do out on the course. It's a symbiotic relationship they lead with these bike riders, and at the end of the day he'll probably go around and say he was very sorry, but things do happen like that. Lilian Jégou, by the way, is a first Tour, and in fact it's his second year in the Tour de France. But let's not forget that Henri de Grangeville, the founder of the Tour de France, was the first holder of the world hour record, and that was an achievement he made way back in May 1893, and that's quite remarkable.
And actually, Paul, we go through the town today where Georges Lefebvre was born. Now, he is actually really the creator of the Tour de France, because it was his idea, which he passed over to his boss, Henri de Grange. Why not have a Circle of France on bicycles? And he said, that's a great idea, and that's what we did 100 years ago. So it's all happening on the road today.
It certainly is, and it's a great route today. It's a fairly flat route. We've got another flat stage tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow is a very important rendezvous. It will be rather difficult for Levi Leipheimer's team, because two riders from Rabobank abandoned after that crash yesterday, and they have to ride the team time trial, and that is going to be rather difficult for them to ride that course with only 7 riders instead of 9.
Well, that's a lovely picture from the helicopter, isn't it? The pack, the spectators, the beautiful farmland here in northeastern corner of France, as the riders continue to take on their feed bags. Now, don't forget, Habla Español, where with the running of the bulls, all at 7 p.m. Eastern Time every day this week, starting tonight. So enjoy that. There's a massive crowd in Pamplona for that rather dangerous game. 2 leaders today in the Tour de France. The gap is now 10 minutes and 30 seconds as Lotto tries to put things to right for McEwen. And as they continue the chase, we'll just take a short break. Welcome back to France as we look here at the Lotto riders. Nick Gates of Australia on the left of our picture, Leon Van Bon. These are the pacemakers for Lotto, trying to get Robbie McEwen now back up. 10 minutes and 33 seconds was the last time trial, the last time check we got. Well, as we've told you, Tyler Hamilton riding at the back of this field with a double fracture of the collarbone. I can't believe it, and I take my hat off to him. This is what he had to say at the press conference he gave last night.
When I was in the hospital today, and just 2 hours ago, and I got the X-rays, and we were basically waiting for 5 or 10 minutes to get the results. I was just praying that it wasn't going to be broken, and that I was going to be able to continue, because I said it just can't be happening. I've worked too hard for this, and this is my 7th tour, but this is the year I really felt like this is my tour. And I think yesterday was a good indication that I'm here ready to fight. And I feel like the legs are strong, and this is really the first time I've ever really focused on the Tour de France 100%. So I've been thinking about it since really since last August, and I spent a lot of I've dedicated really my life to it for this last year. So it's a big disappointment.
Yes, and Tyler Hamilton really is a hero of the Tour de France now. He's done it before, of course, in the Tour of Italy, when he damaged his shoulder blade and still finished 2nd. He's a remarkable man. Well, just looking here, Paul, at 9:55, so it's come down some 30 seconds chopped off in the last couple of kilometres. Frédéric Finot dropping back to the team management here and asking what the gap is. He knows the chase will be on now. These professionals, young as they are, know that they won't be given too much of a lead. Riders do make mistakes, they do miscalculate, of course, and they could stay away, but it's very unusual if they succeed with such a long escape.
Well, it's approximately 91 kilometres to go to the finish, and when the main field starts to pick up the tempo, Phil, that's still going to give us around about 2 hours of racing before we get to the finishing line here in Sedan, which interestingly enough is the town that gave its name to the sedan car originally, because of the fact that it was given to the sedan carriage. And rather a historic town here. The castle that is in town here really is quite magnificent, and it was built around about 1500.
So 15th century, yes, 1470 something I think it was, Paul, but I wasn't actually around myself at the time. Fortunately, I can tell you what, it's the biggest fortified construction in Europe, and we may well get a shot of it from the helicopter as we approach the town. Let's hope so. Looking across the ripening cornfields, I think they are here. One of the race chief referee's cars been in one today, so he'll tell us at the finish, because he very narrowly avoided running over Lilian Jagou, who was knocked off by a TV cameraman just before we came live. Well, looking down there at the moment, the field very wide open. It's a nice area to race this, Paul, but these long roads, they're lucky with the weather. It's humid, not so much wind today.
Very lucky with the weather. It's about 24 degrees Celsius throughout the course of this afternoon, but for the riders, I think the important thing is, Phil, there is hardly any wind at all in the air. Now, if there is wind on a stage like this, it can make this stage, which is a flat stage, a very dangerous stage, because the crosswinds tend to split the main field up. The riders would form diagonal lines across the road, trying to shelter each other from the wind, and it is a very difficult thing to do, to ride in that sort of situation out on the course. So today, a sigh of relief, I think, that there is no wind.
And just the big sprinters teams of 1st and 2nd yesterday, Fassa Bortolo and also Lotto. Just looking here, it's feeding time for the boys on the bikes as they continue to put in their little food bags there. This is Jörg Jatsk, good regular man on the Once team in the pack. We'll take another short break. Join us shortly. Welcome back to the Tour de France. This is Jimmy Casper here, a rider who has a little bit of a neck brace on. It was a terrible crash he had yesterday, and we thought he was most certainly out of the race, whereas we hadn't originally thought there was such a serious injury to Levi Leipheimer. But Casper is not out of the race, and there you see him. But I think he'll want a couple of days to recover from what was a very, very nasty crash for him. He was underneath many, many riders, while others bunny hopped over his face, and a most unpleasant situation for him. Peloton speeding up now. The average speed has put the riders about 10 minutes behind the slowest expected arrival today in Sedan, but they're slowly getting themselves back onto schedule. Now, don't forget, I was telling you earlier, there was this rather nasty incident with the 2 leaders about an hour ago. This is what happened. This is Lilian Jagou, gets a little bit close and gets caught up in a camera cable, and there you see Finot had seen the... Watch the car. Now, that is what I call a fine piece of reflex driving, because off into the cornfield went the chief referee of the race. Anyway, all is well. They're back up and they're still leading, and the gap is 8:42 at the moment. Just looking at the back of the race here, Paul, they're saying 86 kilometres to go now, and they've picked up a second. 8:41 now, the gap.
Just thinking back, Phil, to the crash that happened a little bit earlier on in the afternoon when one of the race referee's cars had to go off into a cornfield to avoid hitting one of the riders. I think the incredible thing is the majority of the drivers in the Tour de France are ex-bike riders, so they have a feeling for the race. They know roughly what direction a guy is going to fall. They know what direction the wind is coming from, so they have the built-in intuition, just exactly what's going to happen. And I think that guy who moved across the road earlier on, he just knew exactly which way to go to avoid the rider. But I have to say, it was pretty close. It was a nasty shock, but because it's the sort of crash you don't expect, and therefore you're not always ready. But obviously that driver was. I'll get his name later on, and I'll tell you and give him due credit, because it was a fine piece of driving. But I think you're right. I think he is a retired pro. Big Jan Ullrich there, just coming out to the screen. You see how the team all ride around him. People often think, as we get this time check again, going further down, 8 minutes 25 seconds, people always think about cycling as being an individual sport, but it is very far from that. There's so much required of the teammates on the flat stages like this, stages that we normally would regard as not being dangerous, although yesterday proved to be the contrary with that dramatic crash towards the end. The teammates of Ullrich stay close to him all the time in case he has a mechanical incident. In case all of a sudden the race turns left or right and they get a crosswind, they'll be there immediately to protect him and shelter him from the wind. This is Jimmy Casper on the far side here. Must be most uncomfortable for him at the moment, but he's a sprinter. And I wonder if he'll try to take part in what should be a sprint finish today. I doubt it very much. It really does look uncomfortable. He can't bend his neck, and it must be feeling quite unpleasant. Well, the doctors have said he has to keep it on for 2 days, and that would be today and tomorrow, because certainly when he rides the team time trial in a couple of days' time, it would not be very comfortable at all. No. The reason these guys want to continue, Phil, it is so important for a bike rider when you ride the Tour de France, is to try and finish it at all costs. If it was another bike, that's Baldata there, you just saw going through bandages on his knees. He had an operation last night at 10 o'clock. Tyler Hamilton here wearing number 71. Hats off to this man. If you're talking about courage, this man has really dug deep into the suitcase of courage this afternoon to stay in the bike race, because he seems to be smiling, but you know what? I think that is just to hide the pain that he's going through right now. And he's no stranger to pain, because he finished second overall in the Tour of Italy with a severe crack in his shoulder blade. Well, the only bone I've ever broken, Paul, is a collarbone. And I tell you, every vibration in the early days of the healing process is a very painful experience. I'm rather wincing with him every time I see that shoulder shaking as he passes through our picture. There's also David Miller, who is still very upset with his team after losing that prologue time trial. So here we are, back with the two leaders. Latest gap is 8:38 now, so they're coming back. But there'll be a while yet before they catch him. Chance to put the kettle on for a cup of tea, and we'll take another break. The whole field in the Tour de France, bar 2 today on this 204.5 kilometres ride out to Sedan. And the lead now, as you can see, 8:18 with the two leaders out in front, Fino and Jegu. Slowly bringing them back. Now, our hearts go out, of course, to Levi Leipheimer today, out of the Tour de France after that tragic exit yesterday with the crash. Well, we sent Frankie and Dreu along to the hospital this morning to have a word with the most unluckiest man in the Tour de France, Levi Leipheimer.
Yesterday, stage 1 had a horrific crash, and Levi Leipheimer was one of those riders that was in that Levi. I'm sure you never thought you'd be sitting in a hospital room after the first day.
No, it's hard to imagine all the work that we've put into the tour, and I've only done, you know, a prologue in the first stage, and you know, I try to think if I made a mistake, but I really wasn't. I was just staying in the front, and you know, it's just bad luck, I guess.
Well, it really was bad luck. We're looking here at the two leaders just now. We may be able to show you that crash again in a moment's time. Jegu and Fino heading up towards the second sprint of the day. Let's have a look at that crash again. It doesn't make pretty viewing, of course, for Levi. It's caused by Médéric Clon, the Cofidis rider on the right, who doesn't fall down, but he did manage to dump the Spanish rider on the road, and then everybody started the ricochet effect. Now, this was only a minor bend, but they'd gone into it at 45 miles an hour, so it made it a much more difficult bend to negotiate. Just a small group getting away there to contest the sprint, won by Alessandro Picotto. There we are, we're back. Look at this, Paul, now. 81.6 kilometres to go. Oh, it's beginning to crack now. About 7 minutes 25 we're hearing now.
Well, they just slashed a minute off very quickly indeed there over the last 5 kilometres or so. I think the impetus has got out of the two leaders' enthusiasm. They now know that the main field will be turning up the screws, accelerating as they get closer to the finishing line. And they know that their advantage, which at one time was almost 11.5 minutes, will crumble. Looks as if there's been a problem here, Phil, because there you go. There's the yellow jersey at the back end of the main field, and somebody went down, and it was because the road narrowed in there going through that small village. And Baldato, poor old Baldato, he's just in front there in the red and black jersey. And he was involved in the crash yesterday, had an operation last night, taking his time to get up and running again. And Peschel, well, he's a very good individual time trialist, but just goes to show once again, Phil, you have to be attentive all of the time for every kilometre of this great bike race.
Well, Fabio Baldato here, he already has a problem with his hand because they actually had to stitch a tendon back in his little finger last night at 10 o'clock for him to come back to the race and continue today, and now he's down again. And this is the big worry, Paul, when you're somebody like Tyler Hamilton with a broken collarbone. It would be awful if he fell again.
Well, the problem is he very well might do, because he has to ride at the back end of the main field for a couple of days. He daren't ride at the front and try and rub shoulders with other riders because there is a greater risk of accident. But even today, this accident happened halfway down the main field. But it wouldn't be the first time that I've seen a rider have 2 very serious accidents in the Tour de France. A couple of years ago, a man by the name of Jean-Claude Bagot crashed and broke his elbow. He decided he wanted to continue in the Tour de France, and he suffered along for a day or so. 2 days after that, he fell off again and broke the other elbow. And that time he decided he'd better call it a day.
Oh, those stories I can't say I enjoy listening to, Paul, but they're all part of the Tour de France and what is undoubtedly its colourful history. Uwe Peschel here, although he's aging himself a little bit now. It's his first Tour de France. He's got a nice big hole in his brand new racing shorts, and he's trying to get back up to the peloton here. These are the only 2 caught out now. The judges tend to turn the blind eye now as the team cars come around these fallen riders, try and shelter them just a little bit out of the wind and hope that they can get through the convoy and back into the peloton. They should be okay. Baldato, look, he's got his right hand bandaged and both his knees, and he's fallen again.
But as I said earlier, Phil, the fact is any bike rider in the Tour de France wants to do everything he can do to get to the finish. It is such a special occasion to be able to ride onto the sacred cobblestones of the Champs-Élysées, which is why these guys will go through all kinds of agony just to stay in the race. And that's what the Tour's about. That's why it's a legendary event. That's why there are so many stories of bravery and courage from these bike riders. They go through an awful lot of hurt sometimes just to stay in the race.
Yes, Mark Lotz, by the way, the teammate of Levi Leipheimer, the American rider who's gone out, and so is Mark. Mark actually fractured a bone just below his right eye on his cheek, and so he too retired yesterday. Only 2 out at the moment. So our 2 leaders, last time check was 7:25, and they're 78 kilometres from the finish. They've still got to hang on to the best part of 2 hours out there. We'll take a break. Welcome back to La Route du Tour de France today. These are 2 leaders, Jegu and Fino, just coming up to the second sprint of the day at 128 kilometres covered. So they're about 76 from the finishing line now. Now, they're not bothering to sprint for these small prizes along the road. They're just, although they're on rival teams, they're staying friends for the day. But the gap is coming down. It's now down to 6 minutes and 40 seconds. And the main field is very definitely chasing. There's the banner. There's a 6 seconds time bonus for the first man. In fact, the first one was Fino. Fino will take it again because he's the best placed overall He was 33 seconds off yellow. He's the virtual leader on the road, of course. If the field don't catch up, he will have the yellow jersey tonight. And that's why he's taking that 6-second bonus, just in case it gets down to a close result at the end of the day. Well, don't forget, for the most action-packed 8 seconds in sports, catch up with PBR Total Bowl airing July the 8th, which is tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Not to be missed. Very nice looking town we're racing into here at Avançon, Paul. The main pack closing in pretty much. When we went through the hotspot sprint, as we call them, at 43 kilometres, it was 9 minutes 40, and Jean-Patrick Nazon was the man that cleaned up for the 2 seconds. Now it's down to just over 6 minutes.
I do think, Phil, that we'll see a sprint for third place here. In fact, it's for Alessandro Patacchi's men on the front end of the main field, helping the Lotto Domo team of Robbie McEwen set the pacemaking. But, you know, the 2 seconds and the 2 points which are at stake could be very important at the end of today's stage. Robbie McEwen, for example, we know is leading that competition by a single point, and he wants to try and take that jersey all around the Hector of France and win it. So you need to get points on every possible occasion you can throughout the Tour.
Well, Bradley McGee, let us not forget, is the man in yellow, having beaten Britain's David Miller by 0.08 of a second. And this year, of course, everybody wants the Maillot Jaune because they carry the initials HD on the yellow jersey, which is the founder of the Tour back in 1903, Henri Desgrange. And that will be some souvenir, because I suspect that next year, as with last year, there'll be no HD on the jerseys. The riders then, this could be a good sprint for the third place, because as Paul has said, you know, you've got Robbie McEwen wants to pick up the small points for the green jersey competition, and the sprinters, if they can nibble at seconds at this early part of the race, they could pull on that yellow jersey at least for a day. McGee showed us yesterday, though, Paul, he was up for it. He got time bonuses yesterday.
Well, he's a crafty bike rider. He's a man who learned his trade on the track, and those track riders, they have the flair of being able to pop out of the bunch at exactly the right time, and that's just what he did yesterday. He was keeping a very close eye on David Miller, who basically was in the same time as him in the overall classification, and gave himself that 4-second buffer. Right now there are 2 sprinters basically breathing down his neck. At 18 seconds Robbie McEwen, 19 seconds for Alessandro Patacchi. If either of those guys wins the stage today, they will overtake Brad McGee in the overall classification, but they have to do that.
Well, it's going to be a nervous approach to the line, whatever happens today after yesterday's mass pile-up in that finishing straight, but it is a good approach to the line today. Now the peloton still in the charge of the big sprinters, and I think we'll see Patacchi and McEwen go this time. At the previous sprint at 43 kilometres, Jean-Patrick Nazon was the man who won the sprint, and he wasn't really challenged, but maybe it'll be all different this time, because there are 2 more, including the one they're about to go for, time bonus sprints before we get to the finish today.
Erik Zabel might be the man also to think about getting a couple of points for himself. He's in 3rd place in the points competition right now after his 3rd place finish yesterday. And Zabel over the years, Phil, has proved to be quite a specialist at earning points out on the course and amassing those points to win himself the green jersey title for a record 6 years in a row. It was a great battle last year between him and, of course, Robbie McEwen. The previous year it had been a great battle between O'Grady and Zabel. And I have a feeling this year that it will once again be a very tightly fought battle, and we may well see the result only on the final day on the Champs-Élysées.
It could happen, as unfortunately did happen to Stuart O'Grady when in the very, very last sprint of the Tour de France he lost the green jersey. He finished with it in Paris, but then had to hand it over to Erik Zabel as the winner. That's the way racing is, I'm afraid. Some win and some lose. The whole field now, though, beginning to line up for the sprint in Avançon. Just to give you some idea of what the time does conversion back into distance, the peloton here are riding about 2 3/4 miles behind the 2 leaders. Paolo Bettini stretching out his back, champion of Italy. They missed him in the sprint yesterday. He finished, in fact, 4th when they checked the photo finish, which was good for him. Just looking now at the riders at the back. Bettini would like another drink, as the riders from Telecom also take time out. Well, we'll just take time out. We'll come back for that sprint for the 3rd place. We'll take a break. And welcome back, and you're just back in time because the sprint is about to begin here in Avançon for the third place. And look at this now, it looks like Jean-Patrick Nazon, who got third place in the earlier sprint of the day, trying to go again. The green jersey of McEwen looks a bit boxed in over to the left there now, but this could well go the way of Jean de la Tour here, as McEwen has suddenly come on the far right of the picture now. McEwen in that green jersey, and just look at the speed of Robbie McEwen. When he wins a sprint, he wins it clearly, doesn't he? He just looks over his shoulder and freewheels to the line. He gets a 2-second time bonus there, as well as 2 points for that green jersey. And that puts him now within a good striking distance of the yellow jersey of Bradley McGee, if McEwen can win at the stage today. There's the results confirmed. And Finot went through a best part of 6 minutes earlier as the winner with Yegu. And now that's this sprint here by Robbie McEwen, beginning to look a very sharp contender already for that green jersey competition, which he leads, as we can see today as well, increasing his lead. But of course it's the finish line which carries all the big points in that competition. There's the latest gap for you, 6 minutes and 14 seconds, just on 70 kilometers still to race. Well, the sun is shining still, Paul. Lovely fluffy clouds there. We thought we were going to get a bit of rain towards the end, but they seem to be going away. Jean-Patrick Nazon there missing out to Robbie McEwen in that third place sprint earlier, and it's good to see that Jean de la Tour are actually performing in aggressive fashion.
Well, the French teams always are aggressive, and I think that was a very aggressive sprint by Robbie McEwen as well, Phil, because the 2-second time bonus that he got himself there brought him just that little bit closer to the sprint finish of for the overall classification. He's now just 16 seconds in arrears. I have a feeling maybe Pataki is just gambling on using all of his energy in the sprint for the finish line right now, because he hasn't got himself involved at all in the intermediary sprints. He's probably thinking about just trying to win as many stages as possible, whereas Robbie McEwen has to try and win stages, but also try and get points out on the course to make sure that he can win the green jersey competition for the second year in a row.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And Pataki was eliminated in the mountains of the Tour of Italy after winning 6 stages of that race throughout the month of May and early June. And he's probably remembering that, because the mountains and the Tour de France is a much harder race than the Tour of Italy. I feel it's a more naturalistic race, isn't it, with more Italian riders. But here, this is the eyes of the world are upon you in the Tour de France, as the riders know only too well. So he'll be afraid of the mountains, I think, Pataki. Here's Brad McGee. He'll know that Robbie's just snicked 2 seconds bonus. Brad comes from the New South Wales area of Australia near Sydney, while Robbie's a Queenslander, and of course anybody that knows Australian sport certainly knows that they are great rivals too. And Bradley McGee, by the way, only the 3rd Australian ever to wear the yellow jersey. The others were Stuart O'Grady in '98 and 2000, and Phil Anderson actually in 1982 and 1983.
I'll tell you one thing, Phil, I think we might see a 4th Australian in the yellow jersey, the way Robbie McEwen is sprinting.
The fact book was wrong.
Himself up fairly close, and in fact he's now just 16 seconds in arrears in that competition. But it's going to be a real rough and tumble sprint here. It's a long, straight final 1,000 meters. There we get a chance to see Roberto Heras. Fortunately for him, he wasn't involved in that accident yesterday. Médéric Klein, the young rider there from Cofidis, is the man a lot of people were blaming for the sprint. I wouldn't put all of the blame onto his shoulders, because the Spanish rider actually touched his back wheel, and I think the climber Gutierrez really didn't have the ability to maneuver his bike quite so well. Climbers are reputedly and renowned, I should say, really, for not being all that good at handling their bikes.
Yeah, I don't think there's been any direct incriminations, as we see the US flag flying there today. And sadly we've lost Levi Leipheimer, or the US have, and but they've kept so far Tyler Hamilton in there despite his broken collarbone. Sprinting is by definition a dangerous business, and people can make high-speed mistakes, but I haven't really heard too many people pointing the finger heavily at Médéric Klein. The peloton tightly packed here though, the heat shimmering off our helicopter exhaust fumes by the look of it. And they're still continuing to chase this gap down. It is 6 minutes and 11 seconds now. Here come the riders up alongside a very enthusiastic crowd, which were out in the country here, don't forget. And they won't be allowed to move those cars until the whole of the Tour de France has gone by, including the following vehicles, which will stretch away. We'll take a break. Welcome back as we look here now at Lilian Yegu from the Crédit Agricole team, in the lead today since the 5th kilometre with his rival from the French team Jean de la Tour, Frédéric Finot. The gap is still just on 6 minutes. Well, time now for a chance at least for us to take a look at a young and up-and-coming rider with Infinity, accelerating the future. And today we're going to talk about Andy Flekinger. We got to know him pretty well yesterday. Andy's one of the tallest riders in the race at 6'3", and he really is an up-and-coming talent. A long breakaway for him yesterday, the majority of it with 2 others, but he went 2 kilometres longer than they did when he launched an attack. And in fact, he picked up enough time along the road in time bonus seconds to wear the leader's white jersey today. And he moved up also to 7th overall, the white jersey for the best young rider in the Tour de France. Last year, his first tour, he finished in 103rd place. And he's only 25 years of age, and I think he's got a great chance of going a lot better this time around. So watch out for Andy Flekinger. He's on the French AG2R team. Left Lotto here. This is Nick Gates at the front now, a teammate and a good friend of Robbie McEwen.
Well, in fact, Robbie McEwen brought him into the team here, Phil. He wanted to try and impose a friend. Gatesy has been a very promising rider for many years. We've seen him riding for 1 or 2 small teams. He rode for a small German semi-professional team, but McEwen felt that Gatesy really needed a big chance in his career to try and get into one of the top teams in the world, so he's asked for him to come across here to the Lotto Domo team. He rode the Giro d'Italia this year, the first time he rode a major stage race in his career. And he said it was pretty difficult after the abandon of Robbie McEwen just to keep the morale going, to keep riding round. But it is important, and was important for him to finish that race, to come here and get selection for the Lotto Domo team, to try and help Robbie McEwen win the green jersey competition for the 2nd year in succession.
It really has been an incredible season for him to ride 2 major tours like that. And hats off to him, because you know, he's 31 years of age, so he's actually made the real big time very late in life, and it's all really thanks to Robbie.
Well, sometimes you need a bit of luck when you're a professional rider. Somebody will help you get into the ranks, and it may well be, even though he has come in late, he'll have a chance of maturing for the last couple of years of his career. But certainly Robbie must have put a lot of pressure on the team to get him into the Tour de France selection, and that's why we see him riding at the front. It was quite funny to talk to him after the prologue just the other day, because he said, "Oh, mate, I can't believe it." He'd ridden the Tour of Switzerland this year, he'd ridden the Tour of Italy, and thought they were pretty big races, but mate, you can't believe how big this bloody race is.
That was pretty good. It sounded just like Nick as well. Nick comes from Taree, which is right up in northern New South Wales, and in fact it's a town a couple of years ago where a whale actually swam up the river out of the ocean, and it made the headlines on the local papers up there, because I was in Australia at the time, and it was a whale on holiday, and they could not turn it around and get it back out to sea. It stayed for 2 weeks in the river. They finally got it back out to the ocean, and that's where Nick Gates comes from, and it's a nice area to live to. Great weather up that way and good training roads, but different summers, of course, down under, and now he's over here for the season in Europe.
One of the biggest bike riders on the US Postal Service there, just at the back, Pavel Padrinos, the Czech rider, riding alongside Roberto Heras, who I have a feeling will ride a superb tour this year. He's had no problems so far throughout the season. He's a man that Lance Armstrong tips for great things to come, and one of the main reasons that Roberto Heras came across to the US Postal Service team was he wanted to learn from Lance Armstrong. He wanted to take advantage of the technology that US Postal have in the individual time trial. He wanted to improve his position, he wanted to improve his time trialing, because that is his weakest point. This is Bilocchi, the man who finished 2nd overall in the Tour last year. That's a very good bike rider.
So we talk about Jan Ullrich having pressure because he's never finished lower than 2nd in his Tours de France, but this man, he's ridden 3 tours, 2/3 and a 2nd place.
A very good bike rider. He reckons this year that he, alongside Gilberto Simoni, can put Armstrong into difficulty in the mountains. Well, it'll be interesting to see whether they can. There's the yellow jersey, Brad McGee, enjoying his day. Like Bilocchi, by the way, though, 29 years of age, a very light bike rider, weighs in at 150 pounds. He had a good win this year in the Classico Alcobendas. but I think more importantly, Phil, was his second place in the Tour de France last year, and he was a serious challenger to Lance on many occasions.
He attacked Lance, and he wasn't up to it in the end, but he did attack him. He wasn't afraid to attack him, and I'm sure he won't be this time around. He might find strange allies too in men like Gilberto Simoni, who's an Italian on a rival team, but they could combine to try and take Lance on 2-on-1.
Well, I think that's the very difficult thing that Lance may well have to face up to. Man for man, I think he's stronger than anybody in this field, but we could see a coalition of Italian riders helping Gilberto Simoni, a coalition of Spanish riders trying to help Yoshiba Bilocchi. And let's not forget, at the start of the bike race, there are a lot of Spanish riders here at the Tour de France. In fact, there are more Spaniards than there are from any other nation. There are 43 Spanish riders, there are 35 Italian riders, and Lance, unfortunately, doesn't have very many compatriots to be able to turn to, because now there are only 5 Americans left in the bike race.
Yes, a good point. Sergei Bocharov there is the rider from Russia on AG Tour. People remember he rode very well in the Jacobs Creek Tour Down Under this year in Australia, which opened up the season. And he's just dropped back to the car. I think he wants a drink. I don't think there's a big problem there. Looking from an unusual angle here on our camera motorbike alongside the 2 leaders. They're now inside 6 minutes and continue to. In fact, we're going to get a 5-minute board there, I think, Paul. Exactly, yes. So at 61 kilometers to go, it is a nice round 5 minutes. So there's still time. We're on Paul's own private formula here of a minute every 10 kilometers. On that basis, we'll wipe them out. 11 kilometers to go. So these are the leaders on today's stage, getting clear at 5 kilometers into the 204 kilometer stage. They're now 140 kilometers out front. We'll take a break.
Benvenuto a Pikachu, benvenuto più di più, benvenuto al cameriere che non serve a chi non siede, benvenuto al corteggiare, benvenuto al commediare, benvenuto presidente che non presidiavi niente, benvenuto col palto, benvenuto a Serrano, leggenda innovativa, benvenuto col colbacco nero, me ne faccio un baffo, benvenuto ai giocolieri.
You're watching the Tour exclusively here on OLN. Hi, everybody. I'm Kirsten Gum, along here with Bob Roll. We're going to get back to all the action of Stage 2 in just a few minutes, and, of course, Phil and Paul. But right now it is time for a U.S. Postal update. Bob, yesterday, big crash at the end of Stage 1. Part of the Postal team was in it.
Yes, absolutely. Here are the current standings. Victor Hugo Pena still in 5th. Lance Armstrong in 8th. He got passed by a rider that was in the breakaway. Andy Flickinger moved down 1 place. Tyler Hamilton looking a little bit tenuous, so he might get that place back before too long. Ekimov in 11th. George, all the riders in the field given the same time as the first place rider, Alessandro Petacchi. Here's a little bit of the replay of the big crash marring yesterday's finale with about 500 meters to go. All started by a touch of wheels, a loss of a pedal, and then the dominoes going down. One thing, the implications to the U.S. Postal team is that Lance Armstrong himself was delayed by this crash. Time-wise, no problem. He did have somebody plow into him from behind, so he had a little bit of a bump on his back, a monkey bump, as he called it earlier in the day. All the riders that are GC contenders are caught behind that crash. But one thing that happened to the Postal riders was that Vyacheslav Ekimov went down quite hard. Got a lot of abrasions, lots of cuts and bruises to him, and that might slow him down a little bit in the next couple of days. Not too bad. I think that Postal came out of it pretty well, much better than some of the other teams have fared. Yeah. One thing that Johan Brunel can look at, though, at the finish, all of the riders grouped around Lance Armstrong. That's something you love to see as a director sportif of any team trying to defend the Tour title. All of his riders, Paternos, Ekimov, Hincapie, Rubiera, Floyd Landis, Roberto Eras, Beltran, all right there with Lance, escorting him to the finish line, trying to keep him out of trouble. I think they came out of it pretty well, considering how bad it could have been.
And the U.S. Postal team looking good today, too. It's time to get back to the action of Stage 2, and Phil and Paul.
Thank you, Kirsten. As we look now at the riders in the peloton, the new champion of France, Didier Roustet, won the title just over a week ago. Looking at the faces here of the riders. At the moment for these riders, it's a routine day, and they were likely to stay that way. This is Koos Murenhout of the Lotto team, and they're shouting at somebody to give them a bit of room as they want to move further up the peloton. Well, the last time check we got, Paul, 5 minutes 21 seconds. As we're looking at the knees here of Fabio Baldato, and he's back in the peloton. He had a little bit of a problem earlier on. He fell again. There on the far side is the rider who fell yesterday, and that is Rodriguez. Gutierrez, I'm sorry. Too many S's in the race. Jose Enrique Gutierrez, who was the first rider to hit the deck in that huge pile-up yesterday, and he also bandaged in both knees.
He went down pretty hard. In fact, he was trying to keep himself in the first 20 positions there. He said he felt quite strong, which is why he was trying to get involved in the sprint yesterday. And what happened was he touched the wheel of a French rider, Médéric Klein from Cofidis, just in front of him, and he went down very hard indeed. But the speed was so high in the last kilometre yesterday, Phil, that there was hardly any chance of the riders behind to avoid him, and the road literally got blocked off. And I would say about 175 riders were delayed by that crash.
Well, we're in the region of Armagnes now, and we should be seeing the banners for, and there they are, for the third and final sprint of the day. So these boys have shared all of the small prizes at the sprints. Fino, I wonder if he'll take the third of the day. It will have given him a total of 18 seconds in bonus time. He started the day 33 seconds behind. So if the peloton were to catch him, he would still hold a very high position in the overall classification, which for a rider of Fino's quality, a young up-and-coming rider, he'd be very proud of that today. Hand up there. I'm not sure whether that's a problem for Yegu. It may well be a softening tyre, but I don't think he's going to take the glory away from Frédéric Fino. Fino has been allowing Yegu the privilege of going first over the small hills, and the compliment return there for the sprint, because those 6 seconds more important to Frédéric Fino.
Well, as we get a chance to see just what it's like from the spectators' view at the Tour de France here, people having a great time on the roads of the Tour de France. So we can expect around about 20 million people to watch the Tour de France from the sides of the road over the next 3 weeks of racing. Well, these two riders, Phil, have gone through with about a 5-minute advantage over the main field, and I'm pretty sure once again we'll see a serious sprint coming up here for third place, because again Robbie McEwen is aiming, I think, to be the next Australian rider to wear the yellow jersey at the Tour de France, and that would be no mean achievement for a man regarded basically as a sprinter.
Absolutely. In fact, he'd be another Aussie in yellow, because Robbie's never worn the yellow jersey before. He's only worn the green, which is not an inconsiderable trophy either. These two riders, the sun getting higher in the sky now. It's coming up to be late afternoon here in France. They're hanging on, 5:27, and the finish is closing in. We'll take another break. Welcome back. We look across at the fine French cows here. I used to organise the milk race. They were always the greatest spectators of the old Tour of Britain. Welcome back to the Tour de France, though, as it makes its way now towards the finish here at Sedan, which is up in northern France. We're heading down to 50 kilometres from the finish. And don't forget, what would you do for $100? Visit America's greatest beaches for all the fun of summer as Beach Ambush returns to OLN in August, and that's Sundays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The two leaders still clear, and hanging on is the word. 51 kilometres from the finish, and it is still Lilian Yegu and Frédéric Fino ahead. Little bit of a switch here to the back of the race, Paul, as we look as though we got Santiago Botero, is it? Just tucked into his team car. I think he's had a flat tyre, and he's coming back through the field. There's his teammates have been told. They're dropping back now to pace him in.
Well, that is rather sad for him, but it just goes to show you have to be attentive. And in fact, he went shooting by one of his teammates there. And here he is coming up to help him out. This is Guerini, a man who won a stage at the top of the Alpe d'Huez a couple of years ago, in what was a very dramatic crash involved with a small cameraman who leapt out to the side of the road called Eric. But Botero, I think, Phil, is a serious challenger this year. He comes from Medellin in Colombia, 5'9", 160 pounds. He was fourth in the Tour de France last year, the winner of the King of the Mountains competition. And in fact, over his career, he's won 3 stage wins, but the sprint is up right now. Robbie McEwen there in 4th place, Oscar Freire in 3rd.
Yes, and look at this now. Jean-Patrick Nazon will not lie down, as up comes Pataki now to show McEwen that he can also sprint for the line. So Pataki is going for it. This is turning out to be quite a sprinter's competition. Pataki just gets it online. A late challenge from Oscar Freire, I think, has failed. And Pataki now doing what McEwen did earlier and has picked up a 2-second time bonus there.
Well, that puts Robbie McEwen and Alessandro Pataki neck and neck in the battle to try and get themselves the yellow jersey at the end of today. There's the confirmation. Finot and Jegu well ahead of the main field, but 3rd place for Alessandro Pataki. And that will give Alessandro Pataki in 3rd place a very nice 2 points in the green jersey competition, but more importantly, I think today, Phil, a 2-second time bonus in the chase for the new yellow jersey.
Yeah, we're waiting for the official time gap there. It hasn't come at us yet, but it's still around 5 minutes for the 2 leaders who passed through the town of Amagna. Good sprint, though. What's going on at the back here?
Bit of an incident there. In fact, it's the white jersey. I think it was Andy Flickinger stopped at the side of the road there with a mechanical problem. There he is. Yeah. His teammates stopped immediately to help him. He was involved in the long breakaway yesterday, Andy Flickinger, and the time bonuses out on the course actually moved him up in the overall classification into the top 10 right now, but more importantly for him, into the lead in the white jersey competition, the competition which designates the best young rider. And this year there are 30 riders actually qualifying for that competition.
It's a very, very good competition. A strange tour in many ways. There are 55 first-time riders in the Tour de France this year. And I note the red number there, Paul, too, because of that wonderful attack he put in yesterday. He's been voted the most aggressive rider of the Tour so far. And sign of aggression has to be red, so that he gets to wear the red number.
Well, there's a magnificent old train there, Phil. And in this part of France, there was at one time a very good communication system using these small trains, a very rural part of France, and certainly those guys not even going as fast as the bike race today.
Well, and that poor chap waving there was about to have his scene blotted out because the train was going to drive past him. These are the 2 leaders still clear, and I think beginning to feel a little bit hopeful that they might hold on to the finish. I can't imagine that will be the case, but you never know. And in fact, Andy Flickinger, we saw in a spot of bother there, did change his bicycle.
Well, that's the most sensible thing to do, to get a quick bike change, especially as the front end of the main field is starting to pick up the pacemaking somewhat. A chance there just to see the front wheel of the man who went across the line in 1st place, Finot. There you can see the problem at the back. The time gap, by the way, to the 2 leaders has increased somewhat to 5 minutes and 50 seconds, but I think that is only a temporary measure. Andy Flickinger, very good professional bike rider. On the way through the convoy of cars, Phil, he's deciding that the best thing to do is take on board a drink as he goes past his own team car. And that's something you've got to think all the time when you're a bike rider. He doesn't want to use or waste any energy going back to get a drink, so on the way by, take something on board. Thank you very much.
Now, just to tell you that these bicycles, obviously with a rider like Flickinger, he's riding on a huge bicycle frame. So they put special bicycles spare on those following cars to suit each of the team riders, and they're already set in the perfect position to mimic the bicycle which they normally ride. So there's no adjustment to be done. It's simply get the right bike, give it to the rider, and he'll feel completely at home on it. But Paul, this breakaway is now heading up towards 6 minutes. I begin to think they really do have a chance now.
Well, I don't think so. I'm pretty sure they'll get caught towards the end. It's just a temporary measure. You look at the main field here, they're going an awful lot faster than the 2 men in front.
Well, the latest gap we have is 5 minutes and 47 seconds as we look now at Pataki's team also driving along with the Lotto. They're leaving it late, but then they always do, don't they, in the Tour de France? Before they wipe them out, we'll see soon. We'll take another break. Welcome back as we look at the yellow jersey on the shoulders of Brad McGee here from Australia, the leader of the race after he won Saturday's prologue time trial. This will be his 3rd day in yellow, and boy, is he having a great tour. The same can't be said, Paul, here as we look here, one of the injured riders here, Jimmy Casper. the sprinter who was looking very, very seriously injured yesterday, and we were absolutely certain would not be racing again today. Here he is in a neck brace. Paul has discovered he's got to keep that on for at least 2 days before he'll be allowed to take it off, but he's in the Tour de France. They just won't go out, will they?
Well, riders don't want to. It's so important. It's such a big race, and some of the young riders coming into the Tour de France for the first time have been absolutely amazed at just how big this bike race is. I mean, when you think of Brad McGee, for example, the events that he's been to around the world, he's been to the Olympic Games several times, he's been to the Commonwealth Games, he's ridden races like the Tour of Italy. But when he came here, he said it was the most important thing he'd ever done in his cycling career, because the Tour de France was just so much bigger than anything else he'd done so far.
Yeah. Even though we commentate on many, many bicycle races, and there's no doubt this one is a lot bigger than any of the others. I think that's Dario Cioni who's setting the pace there for Fassa Bortolo at the moment. Quite clearly now they've sent up a lot more guns to start firing, because they're realizing they may well have misjudged this. They were expecting those two Frenchmen to surrender gracefully as the finish town approached, and what has happened is that Fino, who now senses he could have a yellow jersey, has put his head down and has found great support here from Jegu.
Well, in fact, a colleague of ours, Bob Roll, told me one time about a breakaway situation like this, and what is a tactic that can be adopted, and I'd actually never figured it out myself, was if you get away in a break like this, don't get the gap too big, because it makes the main field panic. And these guys, they kept the gap at around about 10 to 11 minutes for a long period of time, and they seem to be riding along quite easily. But right now, as they know the main field is starting to accelerate, they've still got enough energy left in those legs of theirs to accelerate themselves, and they are putting pressure on the main fields to chase them down right now. And it is quite a clever tactic if you think about it.
Well, that's a good point, Paul, that you've made there, the fact of their energy situation. Many viewers will be wondering how two riders can take on 196 or so, 193 it is at the moment back there, ride for nearly 6 hours today, a massive 200+ kilometers, about 127-28 miles, and then come out again tomorrow and do it all once more.
It's all a question of preparation. These guys, many of them have been racing their bikes for 5, 6, maybe even 10 years, building themselves up all throughout their careers. A professional cyclist nowadays rides between 32 and 40,000 kilometers every year, 25,000 miles, which builds up the resistance required to be able to do that every day in a race like the Tour de France. And the amazing thing is, you talk to the doctors and the physiologists, once you've ridden a 3-week bike race like this, it also changes you physically. You're able to ride so much longer than you ever have done before. It makes you a much stronger bike rider. It's something you could never really find just from pure training.
Well, it certainly would change me physically, but I'm not sure the right way after 3 weeks in the saddle. There's our helicopter down for the moment, as he will shortly be picking up, no doubt, some VIPs and giving them the best seat in the house above the Tour de France. But for the time being, the Tour is going past. Still, to me, not quick enough this race today to bring back those leaders. I'll just have a quick check at the latest information on the computer until I'll tell you what it comes up with, and it says 5 minutes 22, slight reversal.
A nice day, though, for the man at the back there. Just a quick glimpse of Tyler Hamilton surrounded by his CSC teammates. And this will really boost the morale of CSC, because last night, with the accident of Tyler Hamilton, they were very despondent. They were all convinced that he was going to abandon the race. After all, when you have a little crack in your collarbone like that, you're expected to walk away from the race, but he stayed in. Lance Armstrong sensibly at the front end of the main field, making sure that he's not involved in any accidents that might happen further back down the field. He will also be surrounded by his US Postal riders. Now there's a little bit of an attack here, and this is the final climb of the day, the Côte de Longueuil, and I'm surprised to see that, in fact, on the front here, Phil, you can see the man from Jean de la Tour is in fact accelerating, and he's left Jegu behind.
I think this is the slight inexperience. The younger rider here, the second-year pro, first Tour de France for him. I think we were just talking about the effort of the day, and this is about it, I think, for Lilian Jegu. Because the more experienced Frédéric Fino, although it's his first Tour de France, he is quite a good bike rider. He's won quite a few races as a professional. This year, for example, he won a stage in the Dunkirk, 4 days of Dunkirk, which is in fact a 6-day race. The reason he's going, Paul, I reckon he's sensed now his fellow Frenchman has got tired, and he's desperate to try and get that yellow jersey.
Well, as he's opened up a gap so quickly, it's obviously the man was with him was starting to show signs of weakness. The Jigou, the rider from Crédit Agricole, obviously didn't have that much left, and that showed on the flatter stages. This man sensed that, and as soon as he felt this slight incline and felt the advantage, he took advantage of it and jumped off the front end of the main field, and quickly you saw the rider from Crédit Agricole psychologically damaged by that move, and he will rapidly now get picked up by the main field, Phil.
42 kilometers, just about 26 miles to ride, and he's made a decision here to go for it and give it his best shot. So close to a yellow jersey in his first Tour de France, he won't even believe that, and he's not going to give it up without a fight. And I think he's got a chance today, providing his legs don't really leave him in the last 20 kilometers. But now, we're just seeing the peloton come through the camera shot here. Gives you some idea as to how quick these boys are beginning to ride now, being driven on by Fassa Bortolo and by the Lotto teams. There he is now, the lone leader out in front, Frédéric Finot, 33 seconds behind overnight, but now just 16 behind, and the peloton at 5 minutes and 50, they're saying. He's got a chance. We'll take a break.
Bob, you're coming back to the Tour de France this year.
Oh, thank you.
One little thing, the viewers don't like the way you say Tour de France.
Don't you mean Tour de France?
No. Tour de France. Why don't you work on that? Get back to me.
Tour de France. Tour de France. Tour de France.
And welcome back to the Tour de France. Just around about 25 kilometers to go. This is the hare. The hounds are on the attack as well, because a minute and 5 seconds the lead is actually the gap now between the two together, but the bunch is still 5 minutes back. Looking here, Lilian Jigou and Paul, the team cars come up alongside him now. And what's happened here, there's a queue. Has there been a fall here right on the road? Because the road is absolutely blocked. This is the hill, in fact, where we saw the attack made by Finot. But I'm not too sure what's going on here, Paul. There is a rider in the middle, I think possibly a rider with an unshipped chain. Yep. Yes, it is. And he's obviously fallen because he's straightened his handlebars there.
This is Jose Acevedo, one of the climbers from the Once Eroski team, and he it looks you see very often in a situation like this a rider can be changing gears, and what probably happened there was he unshipped his chain, and we've been talking a lot about unshipped chains over the last few days, especially that of David Miller, probably the most famous chain unshipping we've seen in the last few years at the Tour de France.
Well, this man I think may have tumbled because of the fact he was knocking his handlebars straight. But nobody else was involved. The field wouldn't have been climbing particularly quickly, fortunately, uphill, but a very narrow road. All queued up and got round him and left him behind. But the cars and the convoy are still around him, so he will actually get back okay. And Acevedo is a good man for a high overall finish, because he is a rider who's finished high in the Tour de France in the past, but he does all of his work in the mountains. Last year he finished his first Tour de France, by the way. He was 6th overall.
You see how that little incident just halfway down the main field has caused a big long line of bike riders. We're now just approaching 37 kilometers to go, and in fact the man caught in the middle, Jigou, is at 1 minute and 25 seconds to the man who's left him all on his own. And the main field, Phil, they're down, still hovering around the 5-minute mark.
That delay won't help, Paul, that situation that's happened in the peloton. He's starting to nudge out again. It was coming down to nearly 5 minutes. It started to move out to 5:05, so which means they're travelling virtually at the same speed here, and that's not what the peloton want to know right now. They expect to be hauling him back. Now, the race referees will probably turn a blind eye to a situation. You're not allowed to take shelter for more than about 50 or 60 metres behind a team car, but as long as you're showing the right movement forward and not just sitting there, then they probably won't say anything. But if they find that you're still in the same position 10 minutes down the road, you will in fact be disqualified from the race.
Very often what will happen is the other team managers will very often help a rider who's had a mechanical incident from another team, because it's always seen as an infringement of the rules if you're paced back by your own team car. And it's something that team managers have done for many, many years, trying to help somebody from another team who's had a mechanical or a flat tire, because they know at some time or another it could very well be one of their riders in the same situation.
That's right, and fair enough, when you've had a problem like he's had, shaking a little bit of lactic acid out of those legs. He's still a lot of chasing to do here because we're on this little downhill. This is the rider approximately 1 minute and 24 seconds behind. In fact, it's gone out now to 1 minute 33, and the peloton still at 5:05. So I'm very, very skeptical now. There is a real chance here that we could see quite a surprised leader of the Tour tonight in Frédéric Finot. In his first Tour de France, a man who's won only 6 races in his life, and he's been a pro since 1999, which is very, very interesting. But he's smelling here. He's on the scent of a victory, I think.
He's on the scent of a victory, and let's not forget, in his first year as a professional, he actually finished 3rd in the French National Time Trial Championship, so he's very used to riding on his own. This is where we are right now, almost 170 kilometres covered. We're just coming up to the start of the Côte de Longueuil. We get an idea, Phil, on this climb, just how fresh he is, because this is the moment, having been at the front of the bike race for a long time, when you're starting to weaken. If you get a climb like this thrown up in your face, you'll see just how much time he's going to lose to the main field behind.
Well, behind the peloton, and no doubt Christophe Mangin will try to get the 3rd point on the climb. There's only 3 places for the King of the Mountains competition on a 4th category climb. And so Mangin did get the 3rd place on the only other climb of the day, when the peloton were sitting 7 minutes and 40 seconds back. So he actually increased his lead in the King of the Mountains. He'll try to do that again when they come along in about 5 minutes' time just now. 34 kilometres to rest on course to get through to the finish. That's just over 20 miles to go. Approximately 38 to 40 minutes of racing for this man.
I'll tell you what, if he does survive off the front end of the main field, just by even 1 second, he'll become the new leader tonight, because he's moved himself up to just 15 seconds behind Brad McGee in the overall classification, because he's won all the time bonuses out on the course this afternoon. That's 18 seconds in total. So if he crosses the line in 1st place, he'll get himself a 20-second time bonus, and he will be the new leader. But I still believe that the sprinters will get it right, because they nearly always do.
Ah, but you use the word nearly. Always do.
And that's the incredible thing about this sport. There's never any guarantee at all, and Lance Armstrong would be the first man to admit to that. There is no guarantee that he's going to win the Tour de France for the 5th time. He almost lost his chance yesterday, as Levi Leipheimer did, in a strange crash which happened just 450 metres to go to the finish line. He doesn't normally get involved in the sprints at the end of the bike races, but the crash can happen at any time, any place over the next 3 weeks.
Yes, you've got to stay vigilant. This is a wonderful bike race littered with big stories over its 100 years of history. The peloton whipping through the villages now in an attempt, but they've got to ride this last 20-odd miles 5 minutes quicker than that man out in front. Now, when you do hit the wall, of course, after such an effort, you hit it big time, and that's what's happened here to Lilian Jegou. He has now hit the wall, and he's just hanging on for the finish of the day. And I don't suspect he'll even hang on to the big pack when they come up to him in what will be a few kilometres' time. He's got just over 3 minutes, though, as he starts the climb here, the Côte de Longueuil. It's a hill which I'm not sure, Paul, but didn't you ride up this climb in your time?
Well, it's not. This is not the climb of Longueuil. This is the climb of Longueuil. Longueuil is just a little bit further away from us, just on the borders of Luxembourg. And that was an unbelievable stage finish. We were talking about it this morning. A man by the name of Daniel Willems won on that occasion. And he rode the last 40 kilometres, about 150 metres in front of the bunch. And we all kept thinking we would accelerate and catch him towards the end. And nobody ever did. And he held on to win by 150 metres, the gap he'd had for the last hour of racing.
I think you're hedging your bets now. You're explaining people can stay away. I think you're moving on a bit here. You're thinking he might win now.
No, I still think he'll get caught, and I still think the sprinters will have their day. It's a tall order for a lone man to stay so far off the front. Let's not forget, he did attack at 5 kilometres of the race, and this is rather strange to see Danilo De Luca at the back, 54 there.
And Fornaciari's been sent back to bring him on now. I'm not sure whether he's had a problem here or whether he's just been dropped, and it looks to me, Paul, that he might well have been dropped because he's struggling here.
I think he is struggling. Let's not forget he's coming back from an accident that he had just at the end of May. He crashed while he was out training. And I think he is going off the back end of the main field. He needs to ride himself into form over the first week of the Tour de France if he can. He's a talented bike rider, let's not forget. We've seen him ride superb stages in the Giro d'Italia, but at the moment he's having a pretty hard time at the back end of the main field.
Well, this is sad to see. Danilo De Luca is a pretty popular guy. He runs his own internet web page, and so I will tune in later on and find out. Actually, a commentator alongside me here is saying he's suffering from cystitis. Well, that is an extremely painful thing to have, especially if you're riding on the small saddle like he's riding on. The flag there is indicating a nice tailwind for the race now. I wonder if it'll manage to cheer on Lilian Jegou here. Oh boy, those legs are really hurting now, having spent almost all day in the lead. He's over the top of that little climb. 2:36 we've heard now is the gap on him, but he's still away, and there's still a chance as we head towards the 30 kilometers to go now, and our man out in front is still there.
Well,
certainly Frederic Finot is not waiting for anybody. He'll be looking for the 30 kilometers to go sign. It's not far away, and then who knows, he might make it. I begin to hope he does, aren't you? We'll take another break.
And you're watching the Tour exclusively here on OLN. I'm Kirsten Gum along with Bob Roll. We have about 30 kilometers left to the finish of stage 2. Of course, we're going to get back to that action and Phil and Paul in just a few minutes. But first, I want to get some insight from Mr. Bob Roll. Finot has been out there. Frederic Finot has been out in front pretty much all day long. He was in a two-man breakaway for a while, and then we saw him take off by himself. Why did he do that? Because I always thought you wanted help in the breakaway.
Yes, absolutely. A breakaway usually has a better chance to succeed the more riders that are in that. When you have two guys, you hope that each one will contribute the same amount of energy to the breakaway. You can see that Finot attacked Jegou right here on this little climb. I believe he must have felt Jegou weakening a little bit, and that's why he thought that he could make more progress by himself toward the finish line. I think he might also have been hedging a little bit his strength because he is flying towards the finish line. Usually when riders have been 200 kilometers in the front of the bike race, they start to weaken, slow down. I think that Finot actually was playing a little bit of poker there, not showing his whole hand, and now he's really going hard to the finish. Is going to be very, very hard for the peloton to catch him. Also, one tactic that's been forgotten is that when a breakaway gets way up the road, like 12, 13, 14, 15 minutes, the peloton usually reacts violently and chases as hard as they can. But if you keep it around 10 minutes, the peloton generally knows that they can catch that break at any time. I think that Finot realized he didn't want to get more than a 10-minute lead, and it hovered around there for a long time. Now he's putting everything into this break, and he has a great chance to do a solo break to the finish line all the way.
Can he do it, do you think, 30 kilometers?
I think he can.
You think he can?
I think he's going to stay away by
I would like to see that. We'll get back to the action in just a few minutes again and get back to Phil and Paul. But first, have you ever had 1,000 pounds of bowls snorting down your neck? Well, you can experience the running of the bowls from the comfort of your own sofa every night this week. That's on OLN at 7 p.m. Eastern. Now, back to the lads.
Well, thanks, Bob. I'm glad to see Bob Roll agrees with me today. I'm with you, Bob. I think he's going to stay away, and in fact, I hope he does here, because this lone man now, Finot, is out there in front and still holding 4 3/4 minutes. Well, Paul, just look at this now. Casper is back, and a bit of help from a friend in a team car, I think, but it may well have been notched there, because at the back there, Paul, we saw earlier, Casper was slipping into the slipstream of a team car. I think he was with Nick Gates there too, the Lotto rider. So they're back anyway, and you need a few friends in a Tour de France. So what a lovely picture that is. The peloton coursing through the northeast corner of France today. It is a beautiful day. I hope this is going to be sun all the way around. It has been so far. This rider is trying to win yellow for France and for his very small Jean de la Tour team. The last team to get into the Tour de France. It was a controversial team in as well. It would never have come in if it hadn't been a French team, I can assure you of that. But they're now out to vindicate their selection. 4:46, Paul. They're locked. They're not catching you.
Got to tell you one thing. I'm really impressed with this bike rider right now. His body is screaming out in absolute agony to him, telling him to stop. But you know, when you're in a situation like this, when you can win a bike race, you can push yourself into the area which many bike riders know as the red zone, and that's what he's doing right now. He knows that that is only going to hurt for another 35 minutes or so, and if he can keep that advantage, he's going to be the yellow jersey at the Tour de France, and that's an impressive performance by this man who escaped after 5 kilometers. If he succeeds and stays off the front, he will have been in front of the bike race for 199 kilometers, 125 miles.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, but it is the Tour de France. People rise above themselves here. This is Danilo De Luca at the back of the race now, having a terrible day. Clearly, there is something wrong with this man because he is a great rider. He's 27 years of age, had a wonderful start to the season, 4th in the World Cup Classic at Amstel Gold, 8th in Liège-Bastogne-Liège, which isn't too far away from where we are right now. Then he broke his left collarbone with a crash in late May. It's kept him out of the sport. He's on his way back, and we now know from our Italian friends alongside us here that he is suffering today from cystitis, and that, as we know, is very, very painful, especially when you're sitting in the saddle like this. Back to Jimmy Casper, another one of the fallen heroes of the race at the moment, too, having crashed yesterday. He won't get involved in the sprint today. He just wants to finish today and hope he can recover over the next couple of days.
Tête de la course, it's a French for the front end of the bike race, and the front end of the bike race is all one man, Frédéric Finot of France and of the Jean de la Tour team, a team that Lance Armstrong has been very verbal against their selection to the Tour de France over the recent months as we go through 26 kilometers to go to the finish. He blamed, in fact, a rider from Jean de la Tour for an accident that he had in the Dauphiné Libéré. But the team manager here in the Carphil must be going absolutely ballistic, because they could never have dreamed of this. But they're looking at a situation right now as they go under the banner of 25 kilometers to go, where they may well get themselves the yellow jersey, because he's not losing very much time at all.
He can finish in the same time as the peloton as long as he wins, so they can catch him on the line and he would still win the yellow jersey. He's 16 seconds behind overall. He gets 20 seconds if he wins. He'd be in yellow by 4. He wouldn't care if he's in yellow by half a second.
That's all he needs. He just needs to cross the line in first place. Currently the standings are he's 15 seconds in arrears of Bradley McGee, 20 seconds across the line for first place, and it's Alessandro Petacchi's team setting up the pacemaking on the front end right now. But it really isn't an earnest chase. You really would need a team like Domino Vacanzi of Mario Cipollini to nail him back at this time. And for once, it may well be the sprinters have got it completely wrong, and I'm surprised at that, because this is a long breakaway in the early part of the course. 24.5 kilometers to go, and it's still
4:44.
Still hovering around that 4:40
We're heading into
mark.
that little zone, Paul, where suddenly, when the sprinters see these time checks staying consistent, the team sprinters will say, boys, forget it, we're not going to catch him. They'll call them off, and then it's up to McGee's team to chase, or he will open and hold his gap.
It's a very psychological moment for the men in the main field right now, because they are chasing hard. Their bodies are hurting as much as this man's, but when they see they're not pulling him back, they will take a real blow to their morale, and they may well shut down. And then it is, of course, up to the team of Bradley McGee, who so far have been playing a fairly serious game of poker. Now, this man was part of the two-man breakaway a few moments ago, Lilian Jégou. He is back in the main field. They've pulled him back very rapidly indeed. But Finot, on the other hand, Phil, is riding a superb race at the front. He's surviving all of the time. He's surviving the acceleration of the main field. And it's really going to be touch and go. But I think he may well have turned the tables right now.
Well, it's bad luck for this rider on the Crédit Agricole squad. This was once Finot's team. In fact, this young man turned professional for Crédit Agricole the same year that Finot moved across to the team he's with now, Jean de la Tour. There's the catch. They've got one, but they're still racing for second place today. And the Lotto boys are on the front. I'm not sure quite what their enthusiasm is right now, because there's still one man in the lead. Well, it's looking good for the Frenchman. Don't go too far away. And welcome back. We have just passed the sign there. 25 kilometers to go, and he hasn't conceded a second of his lead. There he is, a Frédéric Finot, heading today 204 kilometers to Sedan, and he is still clear and 15 miles from home. There's the latest, 4:35. Paul, 4 minutes 35 seconds at what? He's inside 15 miles to go now. He's about 23 kilometers in the line, maybe 22.
He shouldn't lose it right now. There's no reason at all. He still looks good. He's still showing signs of keeping the concentration there. He's been a very good time trialist throughout his career. Third in the National French Time Trial Championships back in '99 when he turned professional for the first time. He in fact won a very good stage in the 4 days of Dunkirk earlier this season, which gave him the overall lead early on. He lost it then in the time trial to Christophe Moreau. But I think the French cameramen there are starting to get very excited, and they probably never even dreamed of the possibility of this man wearing the yellow jersey. And poor old Robbie McEwen and Alessandro Patacchi, they were playing the game of seconds at the back of the race, and right now they may well have blown it.
Well, Eric Zabel has also told some of his telecom riders to go up and assist with the chase now, so there's 3 teams trying to contain this young man, and they're not having a great deal of success. Another signboard. Is this the 20 to go already? It is. So he's now 12 miles or 20 kilometers from the finish, and every time he sees one of those banners flash by, he's going to increase in his confidence, because the time gap, we're talking of a 5-second difference in the last 5 kilometers.
Absolutely remarkable. This man right now, he'll be calculating in his mind just exactly how much time he needs in between each of those banners indicating how far to go. The banners, by the way, go 20 kilometers, 15, 10, 5, and then it starts to count down in ones. And he will be looking at trying to cover each 5-kilometer section right now in around about 7 minutes. The main field at 4:22. Danilo De Luca a long way back, but the important thing for him is to try and survive today. He won't finish in the main field and won't see them again till tomorrow. But if he can ride the first week of the Tour, he could have good form in the second part of the race.
It happens, especially in a long race, but he's losing any hope of a high finish in Paris right now, because you can't afford to give 2 or 3 minutes to the big stars of the Tour de France. I'm afraid that's not allowed. And Danilo De Luca, in his first Tour de France, we're expecting some great things from him. But instead, he's finding the wrong end of the race. This man, though, has found the right end of the race today. Can you imagine how you would feel if you're French, you're riding on closed roads in the biggest sporting event in the world, and you're racing towards a French city, and there's a chance to pull on a maillot jaune with the initials HD on them, because that was the founder's name 100 years ago.
Very special moment for this man right now, but look at his face, Phil. The pain is really starting to creep in. It's almost agony for this man. He just keeps telling his body, asking his body to go that little bit further. He's now inside of 20 kilometers to go. He's looking at 25 minutes more of agony. The time gap coming down slowly but surely, 4 minutes 11 seconds. I can't believe that they will catch him, but they will not give up until the last moment.
Over the years, Paul, we've seen the peloton time their trap to perfection, and they've often caught riders in the last 500 meters, and still the sprinters have taken out the stage, and that is what they will be thinking down there now. But the fact is, they can be snapping at his heels. If he's over that line in first place, he will get the yellow jersey. He doesn't need any time gap over the peloton, because the 20-second win bonus would be enough. He's 15 seconds off yellow today because of the time bonuses won along the road, and that's without adding on anything to do with the time gap.
3 of the biggest teams in the world right now are chasing down one lone leader. The man at the front, Frédéric Finot, is being chased by Lotto Domo, the riders there in the red and black strip. They're the men trying to set this up for Robbie McEwen. The pink jersey, that's Daniele Nodalo on the right-hand side there. He's trying to whip up the pace for his man, Eric Zabel, and of course Fassa Bortolo trying to make sure they can bring it all back together for their man. And finally, FDJ.com, the team of Bradley McGee, have also sent a man to the front to try and whip up the pacemaking. 4 minutes and 9 seconds. It's coming down in seconds, and if they wanted to catch this man, it would have to be coming down in 30s of seconds.
Well, I'm beginning to hope they don't catch him, I'll be absolutely honest, because this has been a superlative display today. After 5 kilometers, this rider attacked, was quickly joined by the other rider who's gone back, Jigou, and now he's on his own again, and time is running out for the peloton. The FDJ.com team of Bradley McGee probably are feeling a little bit guilty. They haven't been driving all day, because after all, their man is in the yellow jersey. They're supposed to be the team in control for the moment, but on these special days for the sprinters, they were using a good tactic, sitting back and letting others waste energy. 4 minutes 4 seconds is the latest time gap, and he is now getting there. He's about 18 kilometers from the line.
He'll be counting those kilometres by as much as he can. He'll be waiting to try and see the next banner, which will indicate to him 15 kilometres to go. Here is the main field right now. They're charging through the 20 kilometres to go banner. And they are starting to whip up the pace. They're still touching 50 kilometres an hour in this main field. The teams of the sprinters haven't switched off just yet, but they must be kicking themselves knowing that that man at the front, I think, rode a very sensible tactical race. He didn't push too hard in the early part. They didn't get a massive advantage of 15 or 20 minutes. But I tell you what, they are surviving right now.
Just got the time check under that banner. 4 minutes is the gap. 4 minutes, that's the gap for that man, and he's now at 16 kilometres from the finish, while the peloton are at 19 kilometres from the finish. And 4 teams are driving now. He's not safe yet, not yet, but he's getting better. We'll take another break. And welcome back, and Frédéric Finot has a moment ago gone under 15 kilometres from the finish, just over 9 miles from the line on today's stage of 204 kilometres in the Tour de France. His gap is 3 minutes and 41 seconds. As we look at the 2 Seiko riders, they're way back now with Danilo De Luca here of Venacciari. Well, these 2, Paul, just going under that 20 kilometres to go banner, and Danilo De Luca here is in all sorts of trouble and is just wanting to get to the finish and see the race doctor, I think.
But it's tough for a man like this because he's a man with a big reputation. He's a very good bike rider, and sad to see him off the back end of the main field. Telecom sending 4 men to the front right now. Rolf Aldag is the man moving forward there into first position. Daniel Nardello is up here as well, and in fact it seems as if Quick Step are sending a couple of riders to the front end of the main field too. Maybe Paolo Bettini feels that he's got a chance of getting himself the win. There's Jan Ullrich on the right hand side. Ullrich has amazed me so far in this year's Tour. He finished first in the opening day prologue, Phil, and then after that he's riding at the front like a serious contender. It'll be interesting to see how he handles the first few days in the mountains.
Yes, it will be very, very interesting. This was going to be an interesting Tour right from day one. We always felt it, and it's deservedly so in its 100th year. This man is not yet safe. We can't talk about him yet as the winner of today's stage or the next leader of the jersey, because the peloton, with something like for him about 8 miles to run, there we are, just over 7.5 miles to go, 13.5 kilometres, is still really in with a chance, but also in with a chance of being caught. 3:24 is the latest time coming from our satellite system on the computer, and he's not going to want to know any more information now, Paul. He's just going to hurt himself and ride as best he can.
It's got to be maximum right now, absolutely full on all the way to the finish. And I tell you, after escaping into 5 kilometres into the race, his body is screaming out at him to stop, please, but he can't, because at the situation right now, he is the new yellow jersey on the road. All he has to do is cross the line, even just a fraction in front of the main field. If he gets the win, he'll also get himself the yellow jersey, and Jean de La Tour could never have dreamed about that possibility before the start of this year's Tour de France. And what a glory that would be, because he would almost certainly keep it on tomorrow's stage, and then more than likely lose it when we go into the team time trial the day after.
Maybe. He started the day 33 seconds behind Bradley McGee, the race leader. He's collected 18 seconds in time bonuses out on the course, which means he's 15 seconds now behind Bradley McGee. You get 20 for the win, so he doesn't need any time gap over that field. They can catch him right on the line, it wouldn't matter, but that's a tough call. I'm beginning to think that Telecom here are now bringing a 5th rider into play. I'm surprised that they're using so many men. There's another one in the wings there too. There's 6 there. Other teams are joining in, like Française des Jeux and also Quick Step, the Belgian team in the race. It's either a show of, hey, this guy's making a fool of us, or they really will bring him back.
It's all going to go down to the final kilometre, I think, right now, Phil. They're just going under 15 kilometres to go themselves, the main field. Aldag there's Nardello on the far side, Vinokourov,
the faces,
Guerini. All of the big men of this squad are moving to the front.
Leon Van Bon there. This is Eric Zabel, the champion of Germany. They're trying to take him to the line. Those are his teammates in those pink jerseys. He's got one there sitting just behind. There's Bradley McGee moving up nearer the front as well, keeping out of trouble. He doesn't want to see his yellow jersey go. He wants to keep it as long as possible. He's got to enjoy this Tour de France from day one.
15 kilometres to go. The advantage of the lone leader off the front there, Frédéric Finot, was 3 minutes and 10 seconds.
Now it's a crash in the peloton. Here it is. And this is going to disrupt the chase even more, and let's hope there's nobody injured, but there's been a pile-up, a touch of wheels right at the centre of the peloton again. There's plenty of bikes down, Paul, and what now? There's one rider in the middle there not looking at all good.
Somebody's gone down very hard.
It's confidence, is it?
There's a couple of riders gone down there from Vinny Calderolo, and it'll be interesting to see who that is.
Well, it's not Freddie Rodriguez, the American rider on the team. He's just looking for a bike, this rider, and in fact now we can see his number. It's Andriotto, Dario Andriotto. It's another Calderola rider who is down, and I don't think, and this is a Gerolsteiner rider, is it? Yes. It looked to me as though I don't think it was Thomas Lisa. I just caught a glimpse of his number. I think the Gerolsteiner rider there.
Thomas Lisa it was.
It is Thomas Lisa, is it?
Yeah, it's Thomas Lisa who's gone down pretty hard. You can see he's well ripped up there. And
first Tour de France for Thomas. Looks a little bit shaken, but I think he's okay.
There's the race doctor, Gerard Porte, immediately on hand to make sure everybody's okay. The Vinny Calderola rider there, still sitting at the side of the road, looks as if he's come off the worst. And in fact, both of them look pretty badly shaken up.
Well, in fact, that Vino Calderola rider is Marco Milesi. Now I can see him a bit better. And he looks as though he's quite badly stunned, and Gerard Porte is just checking him out there, making sure he's compass mentis. Rather a nasty right knee injury there, Porte. Looks like might require a couple of stitches. Remember, to carry on, you've got to finish the stage, and there's no time like yesterday where you get the same time as the race because you are too far away, more than 1 kilometre away. You lose time while you're staying on the roadside, I'm afraid.
You certainly do, and in fact, at the front end of the bike race, it will not affect anything at all in the progress of Frédéric Finot. His time has come down again, just a fraction, 2 minutes and 50 seconds. But Phil, he is riding an unbelievable solo effort here. And when we looked at him before he broke clear, he didn't look to me as if he still had that kind of energy left in those legs. 2:48. He should survive. There should be no question about that. But it depends on whether or not now the main field slows down after that incident that happened at the back.
Oh gosh, Paul, you've gone confident he's going to win. I'm not feeling so confident anymore now because this peloton, it may have been disrupted by the accident because it doesn't look like it's pushing the pace too much at the moment. We're looking here at Frédéric Finot. He might survive because the peloton has been disrupted by that crash, and they might be adopting the attitude, we're not going to attack. But anyway, we're going to find all out. Not long now to the finish. And welcome back to the Tour de France. We're looking at a very agitated main field here on this second stage of 204 kilometres heading to Sedan. The hero of the day is still up there. Quick Step are charging along at the front here now to try and shut it down. Paul, everybody is throwing in their 10 pennyworth now here at the front of the bunch. The peloton again is beginning to fly. This is Fabio Baldato.
I don't think he's too worried about the pressure right now. He's gone off the back, but let's not forget. He's got a good excuse. It's a very good excuse. He was on the operating table last night, Phil, at 10 o'clock, and he's going to get himself through this stage, hopefully through the next few days, and ride himself back into some kind of form.
Yeah, a wise decision, I think, and there are quite a few riders getting themselves behind the big field right now. Quick Step here, and I think I caught sight of the US Postal. There they are in the centre there, trying to get mixed in. Lance Armstrong moving up, maybe wanting to keep out of any more of these silly crashes.
Well, that's the job of US Postal over the first few days of the Tour de France on the flat stages, to look after Armstrong. They're actually basically riding to keep him at the front end of the peloton to avoid getting involved in any of those crazy little crashes out on the course. There's the lone leader on the left-hand side, Frédéric Finot. He's now really starting to scream out in pain. He's still holding on though, Phil, because at 10 kilometres to go, he was still 2 minutes and 10 seconds ahead.
If he wins, I think it'll be in the same time. They're going to be right on him. It's going to be as close as that, or he's going to be caught in the last kilometre. We never wish that on him now. It's been a superb ride in the great adventurous style, which is how the Tour de France has come to be so popular amongst the public, because of men who try to outwit the whole pack themselves. His manager here is just going to talk to him and talk. He's not allowed to even give him a drink at this stage of the race. He can only speak to him, and he certainly can't touch him, and he won't be allowed to stay there very long either. The race radios will call him out of it, which probably has just happened. We can't hear what the race referees say, of course. That's amongst the race officials and the riders and the riders' helpers. But in that chase behind, there's the latest gap, 2 minutes and 20 seconds. He doesn't even want to look at the board. He's just closing his eyes here. Look at the massive crowd over these rolling hillsides. We don't go higher than 200 meters all day, but sadly, it's the hardest part of the race now. And let's not forget either, the last French rider to win a stage was Richard Virenque, and that was last year, and I think it was stage number 14.
And I think it was at the top of the Mont Ventoux as well.
Oh,
and that was the stage that Lance Armstrong was booed by the French crowd because they didn't want their darling Richard to get caught by the charging American.
1 minute 50, that board said. 1 minute 50. Paul, I don't think he's going to do it.
Well, he really has. I think he's hit the wall right now. He's still got a great chance to survive. But, you know, there is one more nasty little climb on the run into town as well. The main field have spread right out across this large road, but they're still keeping the tempo nice and high. There's the yellow jersey at the front end of the main field, Bradley McGee. This is the back end of the peloton.
Thomas
These are the
Lisa,
riders who've had a lot of problems with the crashes. There's Jimmy Casper. He will just try and ride up towards the finish and survive one more day. Tough call for a Frenchman to have such a nasty accident and try and stay in the bike race as well.
Well, there's the peloton. They seem to slow just a little bit and then they get down to the job in hand again. They haven't given up yet. They might soon smell that they're in with a catch. In a way, I hope not. We'll take another break. Join us soon. And we're back with the Tour de France, and it is fantastic at the moment, as we're seeing now David Miller launch an attack at the front. Well, David Miller was on the attack, but this is a counter-attack now as well. Everybody, it seems, wants to get in on the act. This is the Gerolsteiner rider, Olaf Pollak, I think it is, out in front at the moment. Or is it Angel Casero himself who's launched an attack? It's Rennie Hasselbacher. It's the long flowing locks. I wasn't too sure which one hadn't had his haircut this week. Well, Hasselbacher now, after seeing an attack, it's down to just 17 seconds. So if our camera swings, we are going to see Frederic Fino, and it's going to be a very sad sight indeed.
But the yellow jersey is on the attack, Phil. This is unbelievable. Brad McGee sat at the back of the main field for the majority of the day. He's now come forward to take responsibility, and you look at that big long line in the main field. Everybody is in absolute agony right now. They're just hoping for this race to be over today as we accelerate. This is Pataki's teammates at the back here. Now, this is rather a surprise because the man we were expecting to be at the front to win the bike race, Pataki, is going off the back.
5 kilometers to go. I think they'll split the bunch with a chase like this. I think the sprinters might have overdone it for themselves today because the men we call the stayers, the long-term prospects for the big finish, have all of a sudden got involved in this. There is the bunch at 5 kilometers to go. They're on him, and he's about 8 seconds in front. 3 miles from the finish, Paul, and he's been in the lead since 200 kilometers. Incredible.
Unbelievable, unbelievable. There he is, and when we pull back, we will see the charge of the main field. He will get gobbled up by the peloton before we come into town. There they are. They are just a little bit further back, and this is going to be a very nervous moment. A lot of the sprinters have moved themselves back into this bike race. There's the yellow jersey, but where is the green jersey of Robbie McEwen? You can see there in the front end of the main field as well, Eric Zabel is the white jersey national champion of Germany this year. This guy is surviving. He won't give up. No. He can't give up. He's got to keep riding until they come right by him. This is unbelievable, Phil, as we come now at 4 kilometers to go.
4 kilometers to go. It's 200 kilometers since this race started. It's 195 since he broke clear of them, and they're breathing down the seat of his pants. There they are at 4 kilometers to go. But now they're beginning to look at who is going to make the move. If they hesitate, of course, he'll hang on. There's still a chance, but it is a slim one.
It's a very slim chance. I don't think he'll do it because look at this acceleration coming at the front end of the main field right now. They're trying to get it sorted out. Bradley McGee is looking to stay at the front end of the main field. Just in front of him there is Stuart O'Grady. Right up there in the 4th position slot is Baden Cook. He's a very good sprinter. He'll try and make sure he can get himself across the line in first place. And in fact, Brad McGee has said what he wants to do for the rest of the Tour de France is try and lead out the sprints for his teammate Cook. Through this small chicane, everybody upright for the moment. The pressure is absolutely and utterly on. We are touching speeds right now, Phil, of around about 60 kilometers an hour.
A long, thin line, and Bradley McGee is not certain to keep his race lead if and when he catches Frederic Fino, because there are others with the win bonus could take that jersey away from him, and one is, of course, Robbie McEwen. Paul, we are under 3 kilometres to go.
3 kilometres to go. It's going to be less than 4 minutes. This is the man who's led the race since the 5th kilometre when he attacked, but right now the main part of the peloton is right on his tail. There's the yellow jersey of Brad McGee right in the middle of all the action. What a shame. I thought a few moments ago this guy was going to survive, but the 195-kilometre breakaway, it just really wasn't close enough to the finish.
2 kilometres and a bit from the end. They've caught Frederic Fino, and I've just heard a gasp on the television commentary position here by all of the TV commentators. I don't think I've ever heard that before. I think they're all as disappointed as Frederic Fino, because that was a brave attack. But he's wiped out, Paul. It's back to the sprinters.
Well, it's not necessarily the sprinters, because that climb just about 4 kilometres ago hurt an awful lot of the sprinters. The man I expected to win the stage, Alessandro Pataki's at the back end of the main field. I doubt if he'll be able to get to the front before we get into the final finishing straight here in Sedan. But look at the yellow jersey. He's well up there in 4th position, riding very well. He wants to keep this yellow jersey for another day.
Well, remember, Brad McGee won the stage with a slight uphill finish in Avranches last year. Now, this isn't uphill all the way to the line, but it might give Brad McGee the strength he needs to hold the sprinters, the pure sprinters at bay. 2 kilometres to go now. Oscar Freire, I've noticed in there. There's Eric Zabel on second wheel. Stuart O'Grady has got Zabel's wheel, that other white jersey there. Up on the left-hand side of the road goes the Brioche boys now, so they're looking to move their sprinter into the action as well.
That's Jean-Patrick Nazon. He's actually sprinting very well so far in the Tour de France, dropping a bit further back there. Brad McGee goes round that corner in 5th place. We want to get round these corners as safely as possible. We know that the Nazon brothers are both very good sprinters, and they're getting themselves organised. Eric Zabel down into about 5th place. He doesn't have too many teammates around him. The orange jersey a bit further back is the man who was 2 times champion of the world, Oscar Freire. But Brad McGee is doing a brilliant ride right now. Stuart O'Grady is there too.
O'Grady's there now. This is the lead out for the ride in 3rd place here. Damien Nazon, the brother of Jean-Patrick, who's been sprinting well earlier today, but also up there is the yellow jersey, who knows he may have to win the stage to keep yellow, because there is a 20-second win bonus. As they line up now for the finish, there'll be no complaints about this finishing line. It is dead straight, and it's the Brioche team now trying to lead their sprinters to the line. There's only one of them left. That's Damien. Hey, here goes McGee. McGee has broken early, but he is a pursuiter. He has terrific speed in those legs. Nazon is chasing him.
The lime green jersey, there's Freddie Rodriguez. He's well up there for the Vinny Calderolo team, up into 3rd place. You can see all over the front of this main field is Eric Zabel. McGee has led them out, but he's not going to win the stage right now. There's a moment of hesitation. Bettini's in the middle. Oscar Freire is starting down the right-hand side. This is going to be a bolt for the finishing line. In fact, there's some confusion moving up there right now. You can see Eric Zabel in the middle.
Zabel is in the middle, but Jan Kirsipuu is also breaking in the centre now. So too is Jean-Patrick Nazon. They're all getting in on the act here. A final dash for the line now is Jean-Patrick Nazon, who's launched himself, and I think that's Kirsipuu challenging on the right, and on the left now comes the sprinters too from and he's got it, and I'm trying
Baden
it's
Cook.
Baden Cook. I completely forgot about Baden Cook, and he continues the happy saga of the Française des Jeux.com team, because with Baden Cook getting the win, then his teammate McGee will keep, we think, the yellow jersey. It has to go to the seconds on the calculation, but what an unbelievable finish. And just when I thought Jan Kirsipuu had got it, up came Cookie and took it off him. Here's the finish. Baden Cook is too far away. He gets 20 seconds for the win. He'll move to within 4 seconds of yellow. He'll be second tonight with David Miller. What a terrific race.
What an unbelievable race that was. Let's just look at it once more, Phil, from the skies here right now. There you can see Kirsipuu ideally positioned. Cookie in 3rd position there. He was just waiting for the moment to pounce, and Eric Zabel slipping back just a little bit in 4th slot. But Zabel's position there should give him the green jersey lead at the end of today's stage.
Unbelievable the way Baden Cook has hit the line here. He's got the victory. Zabel, it looks like he will have crossed the line in 4th place. Oh, well, time for us to get our breath back. That was a great sprint. I'd almost forgotten about Baden Cook being on the same team. He gets the victory. We'll take a break. Come back and join us. What an amazing day this has been. And welcome back. Well, we've seen a superb end to today's stage of the Tour de France. A win for Baden Cook of Australia. There's the full result for you. No crashes, I'm delighted to say, in the finishing sprint. Jean-Patrick Nazon just held off Jan Kirsipuu. Had a good day, did Nazon. Eric Zabel fourth. Robbie McEwen there getting in 8th place. I'm not too sure that will be enough for him to keep his lead in the green jersey competition. I think we might find it goes across to Eric Zabel. Well, the Tour de France continues. There's plenty of racing to come yet. In stage 3 tomorrow, we restart at Charleville-Mézières and we go to Saint-Dizier. And we'll be with you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. And 2.5 hours of planned live coverage there, unless the riders take a bit longer, and then we'll stay with it, of course, all the way to the end. Our prime time coverage, as usual, coming to you, will begin at 8 p.m. and that's both Eastern Time and Pacific Time. Don't miss any of what is turning out to be a fantastic race. Well, there we are, looking down now on Jean-Patrick Nazon there. They're getting ready for the big prize presentation as we look down at the long straight in which Baden Cook won the stage 2 of the Tour de France. I think we can just show you the map for tomorrow because it's a long stage again tomorrow, not as long as it was today, of course. There we are, right up in the far corner of France now. We just nip into Belgium, I think, a little bit. No, we don't. We drop due south, that's right, from Charleville-Mézières down to Saint-Dizier. And then we're on the eve of what will be the team time trial. So the sprinters will try to keep it together tomorrow, and then Lance Armstrong will need to come out and battle on that team time trial stage. Well, it's been a superb race today. Don't forget, you can read anecdotes and stories from all of the boys on the OLN TV team. There's the address for you at our website, and it's on olntv.com, our traditional website for you to come and visit us. The sprinters, boy, they got their say in the end, didn't they? And there was a long time out there when we thought they wouldn't, but they closed that gap in those last 5 kilometres like the true top bike riders they really are. It would have been very, very difficult to have hung on to wheels in that peloton today for mere normal human beings. So the Tour de France goes on. There will be a little bit of change overall because Baden Cook will come into the top 2 now with that 20-second win bonus. But still in that yellow jersey will be Bradley McGee. I bet you 5 kilometres to go today. He didn't think he would be in the yellow jersey. It would have gone over to the battler of the day, this wonderful man here, Frédéric Finot. Well, I hope you're enjoying our coverage. We're certainly enjoying the Tour de France, and it's only a couple of days old. We'll be back again tomorrow for Bob, for Paul, for Kirsten, for everybody involved, and for me, Phil Liggett. Goodbye for now.